Krishna, welcome. Here. Okay, so we're studying Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 2, Text 26. It's July 1st, 2022. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim sarasvatim vyasam tato jayamudirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should first offer respectful obeisances of the personality of Godhead Narayan, to Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, to Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Prayeshva Bhadre Shu Nicham Bhagavata Sedaya Bhagavat Yutamashloke Bhakti Bhavati Naistiki. Text 26 of Canto 3, Chapter 2. Tata Nandavrajam
Nata
Tata
Rajam
Ita
Ita
Pitra
Itra
Namsat
Namsat
Vibhibhyata
Vivyata
Ekadasha
Ekadasha
Sama
Sama
Tatra
Tatra
Gudha Archi
Gutta Archi
Sabala
Sabala
Avasat
Avasat
Tato Nanda Vrajamita Tato Nanda Vrajamita Pitra Kamsad Vibhibhyata Pitra Kamsad Vibhibhyata Ekadasha Samastatra Ekadasha Samastatra Gudharchi Sabalo Vasat Tato Nanda Vrajam Ita Tato Nanda Vrajam Ita Pitra Kamsad Vibhibhyata Ekadasha Samastatra Ekadasha Samastatra Gudarchi Sabalo Vasat Gudarchi Sabalo Vasat. We'll do the word meanings. Tata. Thereafter.
Thereafter
Nanda Vrajam.
Nanda Braja
Cow pastures of Nanda Maharaj.
Cow pastures of Nanda Maharaj
Ita.
Ita
Being brought up.
being brought up
Pitra.
Petra
By his father.
by the father
Kamsat.
Kamsat
From Kamsa.
from Kamsa
Vibhibhyata.
Vivyata
Being afraid of.
being afraid of
Ekadasha.
Ekadasha
11.
11
Sama.
Sama
Years.
years
Tatra.
Tatra
Therein.
therein
Gudha Archi.
Gutta Archi
Covered fire.
covered fire
Sabala.
Sabala
With Baladev.
with Baladev
Avasat.
Abhasat
Resided.
resided.
Translation. Thereafter, his father, being afraid of Kamsa, brought him to the cow pastures of Maharaj Nanda. And there he lived for 11 years like a covered flame with his elder brother Baladev. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. This is Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 2, Text 26. We're reading Srila Prabhupada's purport. There was no necessity of the Lord's being dispatched to the house of Nanda Maharaj out of fear of Kamsa's determination to kill him as soon as he appeared. It is the business of the Asuras to try to kill the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or to prove by all means that there is no God, or that Krishna is an ordinary human being and not God. Lord Krishna is not affected by such determination of man of Kamsa's class, but in order to play the role of a child, he agreed to be carried by his father to the cow pastures of Nanda Maharaj, because Vasudeva was afraid of Kamsa. Nanda Maharaj was due to receive him as his child, and Yashoda Mai was also to enjoy the childhood pastimes of the Lord. And therefore, to fulfill everyone's desire, he was carried from Mathura to Vrindavan just after his appearance in the prison house of Kamsa. He lived there for 11 years and completed all his fascinating pastimes of childhood, boyhood, and adolescence with his elder brother, Lord Baladev, his first expansion. Vasudev's thought of protecting Krishna from the wrath of Kamsa is part of a transcendental relationship. The Lord enjoys more when someone takes him as his subordinate son who needs the protection of a father than he does when someone accepts him as the Supreme Lord. He is the father of everyone and he protects everyone, but when his devotee takes it for granted the Lord is to be protected by the devotee's care, it is a transcendental joy for the Lord. Thus, when Vasudeva, out of fear of Kamsa, carried him to Vrindavan, the Lord enjoyed it. Otherwise, he had no fear from Kamsa or anyone else. Hare Krishna. Om Gyanatirmirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Caitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayamupakatamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Tapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Saganaraganatanditantam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagna Lalita Shri Vishakanditam Scha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopikat Kanta Radhakanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhano Sate Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpatayubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva cha Patitanan Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivedanta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prestaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine, Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 2, entitled Remembrance of Lord Krishna, Text 26. Tatonanda Vrajam Ita Pitra Kamsat Vibhibyata Ekadasa Samastatra Udarchi Sabalo Vasat. Thereafter his father, being afraid of Kamsa, brought him to the cow pastures of Maharaj Nanda, and there he lived for 11 years like a covered flame with his elder brother Baladev. Hare Krishna. Kim and Anasuya, Hare Krishna. Okay, so Prabhupada starts the purport right in the second sentence. He said, it is the business of the Asuras to try to kill the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or to prove by all means that there is no God, or that Krishna is an ordinary human being, and not God. Okay. So yeah, so we have like the pastimes like Lord Varahadev described in the third canto, and Hiranyaksha, big demoniac person. Of course, like in one sense, there's no demons. In one sense, like all spirit souls are pure, the diamond soul, right? We use that analogy, the diamond soul. I mentioned in some recent weeks' classes. There's a book by Saint Teresa of Avila called The Interior Castle. And the whole book is based on the analogy of the soul as a diamond with 7 mansions. And in the innermost mansion, there's Jesus, there's like that. So yeah, so all souls are diamonds. And like, we can see, we can experience our own diamond pure nature, and we can all experience the covering, right? Covering, whether it's by material goodness or passion or ignorance, our self-deceptions. So in a sense, we can, notice what would be called demoniac nature in all of us, and divine nature in everyone, like that. But so like Hiranyaksha, so the essence is like demoniac nature means like against God, Pravritincha, Nivritincha, Jananasu, Jananavidar Asura, Nashacham Navichachuro, Nasacham Teshu Vijite, that the demonic, we don't know, when we're influenced by the demoniac modes, we don't know what to do, what not to do. And we're going in the wrong direction. We're acting out of envy of ourselves, or self-sabotaging behavior, right? We're getting in the way of our own joy, like, rather than going towards self-realization and developing love for Krishna. We're alienating ourselves from ourselves. Very unfortunate. So Hiranyaksha is trying to kill Lord Vishnu in the form of a boar with his club. Hiranyakashipu with his fists, trying to kill Lord Nrsingadev. And of course, like Krishna's like wrestling with Kamsa. Okay, so like trying to kill God. All right, and so in modern times, that might seem rather primitive and crude, but the essence is still there, and Prabhupada points that out. Like so now, like the way to try to kill God, kill Krishna, is through philosophy. Krishna says Avajananti Mamuda, Manushinta Mashuta, Parambhavamajanto Mambuta Maheshwaram. That like the foolish, the unintelligent, they understand my supreme nature and my transcendental nature. So Prabhupada says it's the business of the Asuras to try to kill the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or to prove by all means that there is no God, or that Krishna is an ordinary human being and not God. Yeah. So through different attempts at apparent rationality and logic, like, well, if I can't see God, then he doesn't exist. And so we want to be able. We want to be able to respond. We want to be strong in ourselves, in our experience, in our conviction, in our capacity to share, to present any aspect of the Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita philosophy with reference to rationality and logic, right? Sometimes we'll say, oh, have you seen subatomic particles? No. Do you believe subatomic particles exist? Well, of course. Well, you said you don't. You only believe what you can see. Do you believe that Tibet exists? Well, of course. But you said you only believe. So the idea is, of course, I accept the reality of protons and electrons in Tibet, because I have a friend who visited Tibet, where I learned in high school science class about neutrons and electrons from my teacher, who I trust her authority. Okay, right. So for things beyond our senses, yes. So it's about, okay, so you trust your teacher in college, you trust your friend, you trust the news report, you trust this source on the internet. Okay, we're not criticizing that. We're establishing the point. We're establishing the point that we all accept authority. We all accept authority for receiving knowledge that is beyond the purview of our senses. So, yeah. So I'm glad to say that as years go on, I more and more accept the authority of Srila Prabhupada and what's in these books for knowledge about spirit. And it's not just about accepting authority, right? So let's call it like 3 pillars for any aspect of Krishna consciousness. We want to be able to share it with reference to logic, rationality, that's one. And in relation to authority, it's nice to learn to reference Shastra, reference Prabhupada, reference Bhagavatam, and be able to cite a verse from Bhagavad Gita, and to share our own experience. It's very powerful, right? Like in Safito, we focus a lot on like I statements, right? When people start preaching you, and it's like, it's like we often feel there's no power. I mean, there's a place for you statements. There's a place for we statements, and to share from our experience. So for any aspect of the philosophy, not just the philosophy, but the ontology, the epistemology of Krishna consciousness, of Bhakti Yoga, to be able to cite Shastric authority, to be able to engage in logical, rational conversation, to establish that it's actually reasonable. It's actually reasonable to conclude that there's a personal intelligence behind the universe. It's actually reasonable to conclude that we're not the dead matter of the body, that we're some non-physical entity. It's actually reasonable to conclude to conclude that the laws of karma as described here, and to share personal experience. So right there at the start of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Antavanti me deha nichishokta sharirana anasino pranayasa kashtidyasva bharati. He says to Arjuna, only the material body of the indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal soul is subject to destruction. Okay. Avinasi tu tadviti yena sarvamitam tata dinasham aviyasyasya nakaschit kartumahasi. No, Krishna says to Arjuna, know that which pervades the entire body is never destroyed. No one can destroy the imperishable soul. Dihinosmi yata dehe komaram yavanam jara tata dehantara praktir dirasthatrananyati. That's it. Quintessential verse from Bhagavad Gita, 2.13, chapter 2, text 13. As the embodied soul continually passes in this body from childhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at the time of death. So if we just take that point, it's an ABC fundamental point. ABC fundamental point, but most all of the world, including most of what goes on in the name of religion or philosophy, are missing this point. I'm not saying that I get the point, but at least intellectually we can get, right, okay, right. So if we look at this, the difference between matter and spirit, so we experience, okay. So I was in a toddler body, I remember toddling around. I was in a teenager body. Okay, I remember. So the body is completely changed. Right? So it's Bhagavad Gita. It's science. It's Bhagavad Gita. That's why it's universal. That's what it says. It's not like, what group do you do? What religion? What do you believe in? And this is universal principles. Someone can identify as a Muslim, an atheist, black, white, Jew, Christian, Chinese, tall, short, and Republican, Democrat, the body changes, right? Not one atom in the body now that was there when we were in the 5-year-old body, but there's some identity. Right? So spiritual intelligence is like, I want to understand who I am. Who is that identity? What is the nature of that identity that continues on despite the change of body? Okay, and so. And then, of course, we have this sublime process called Bhakti Yoga to realize this is self-realization, not just some vague ethereal term. Essentially, Safito programs, whether it's our foundational seminar, advanced seminar, Sophotope 3, and adventure and conscious living, personal coaching, coach training. It's we might be coaching or facilitating around money or around fitness. It's all about supporting the self to turn towards itself in self-discovery, and the self to turn towards God, super soul, Krishna, in the spirit of loving devotion. That's what it's all about, to a transformational process to realize these, to realize the truths here. And and so we can cultivate a feeling of gratitude that we're getting this knowledge and the most sublime process to realize this knowledge, not just abstract knowledge, from Srila Prabhupada, perfectly representing Sri Krishna and the line of pure spiritual teachers. And yeah, right. So again, Prabhupada said, in the modern day, it's not so much about trying to kill God with like a club like Hiranyaksha, but trying to kill God with different clever philosophies. So like the essence isn't to be like intellectual. The essence, simple-hearted, childlike, loving Krishna with love and devotion. And at the same time, it can be real helpful, even imperative, to cultivate knowledge of distinctions. Knowledge is power. Knowledge means the capacity to make distinctions. So we know how to relate to different philosophies. So we don't allow ourselves to get deviated from the path of cleansing the diamond soul. Many philosophies okay, we should be skeptical of everything. Be open, skeptical. Don't believe blindly. So that's true. And Bhagavad Gita discourages blind following, for sure. At the same time, what often happens, like in the name of skepticism, then skepticism itself becomes like a dogmatic religion, becomes a dogmatic religion. What about, okay, we should be skeptical of everything. What about skeptical of skepticism? Right? Because otherwise, then that just becomes, okay, because of this idea of openness. Oh, I'm openness. Yes, we're open. We use this analogy sometimes. Yeah, because I was open. As a child, I learned from a teacher in first grade, 3 + 3 is 6. Now, if I say, now I have knowledge. Now I have realized knowledge. 3 + 3 is 6. Or someone say, well, that means you're closed-minded. I'm not closed-minded. Actually, I'm open. And it's a quality of the soul to be open, liberal. If you like show me some logic that 3 + 3 is something other than 6, I'm open to it. And so this openness, openness, it's not meant to be like it's a natural quality of the soul. In fact, to the extent that I'm secure in myself, then I'm open. Sure. If I'm like insecure in my stance, then I'll need to wear a blinder because I don't want to be exposed to this because it might threaten my worldview. But openness, sure, openness as an instrumental virtue to discover objective good, what is objectively good, true, beautiful. Okay. Right. So through openness, we come to realize, oh, okay, yeah, I'm not the body, I'm spirit, soul. The nature of the soul is to serve Krishna with love and devotion. Through openness, it makes sense that God's a person. And so we have this process, this eternal, timeless process, given to us in very practical ways by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, representing great saintly devotees like Prahlad Maharaj. Prahlad Maharaj described 9 aspects, 9 elements of the process of bhakti. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, Smaranam Padasevanam, Archanam Bandhanam Dasyam, Sakyamatma Nivedanam. iti pushpara pita Vishnu bhaktis chen navalakshana kriyata bhagavat yada tatmanye dita uttama. Hearing, chanting, remembering, right? Meditation, remembering Krishna, doing deity worship, archanam, offering prayers, right? Like in Christianity, that's a main process. Praying, praying to Jesus, praying to God, surrendering ourselves completely, service, developing friendship. And this is here, like, so it's described right in this purport, so many varieties and nuances of types of relationship with Bhagavan Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, right? His elder brother Lord Baladev, so elder brother, and Vasudeva wanting to protect Krishna from Kamsa, so this fatherly affection, and yes, and then Yashoda Mai enjoying the childhood pastimes, and describes his adolescent pastimes with the gopis, and Uddhava's friendship and love. So, so very, very sweet variety. I'll say that at least in what I've been exposed to in this lifetime, that hearing what's called the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya tradition, coming through Srila Prabhupada, this science of God, the science of God realization, the science of self-realization, the descriptions of the subtleties and the nuances and the expansiveness of varieties of relationships possible with the Supreme Personality of Godhead is most elaborately described, most completely described. Okay, and so that's very fortunate, and just to make a distinction, so that because so that this is being revealed to us, that doesn't mean that we are more advanced in self-realization or God consciousness than someone who might be practicing a path where there's maybe less philosophical completeness and nuance, less descriptions about the activities, and that God plays a flute and like that. might be less expansive. Doesn't mean that we're like more advanced than they are, because the goal again isn't like intellectualism. The idea is to use our intellect to protect our tender bhakti creeper. And of course, a danger is in the name of philosophy or intellect. We might speak for myself. I might and have use that as like a barrier, let's call it a mask, Safato terminology. Use that as a barrier to the simple-hearted, sweet, loving devotion to Srila Prabhupada and Sri Radha Krishna, and like that. And so someone might be practicing the path where the philosophy is not as developed. The essence of bhakti is the same, and their heart is simply offering prayer to God through Muhammad or Jesus or whatever, or Buddha, and their heart is very, very pure. That's advancement. So just want to make that distinction there. Okay. So Prabhupada talks a bit about the Vatsalya Ras. It's the parental Ras. Okay. Vasudeva's thought of protecting Krishna from the wrath of Kamsa is part of a transcendental relationship. The Lord enjoys more when someone takes him as his subordinate son who needs the protection of a father than he does when someone accepts him as the Supreme Lord. He is the father of everyone and he protects everyone. But when his devotee takes it for granted that the Lord is to be protected by the devotee's care, it is a transcendental joy for the Lord. Thus, when Vasudeva, out of fear of Kamsa, carried him to Vrindavan, the Lord enjoyed it. Otherwise, he had no fear from Kamsa or anyone else. an example Prabhupada gives often. He said that there was some lord, some like high-placed politician or in the royalty of England. Prabhupada tells the story, and so someone came to see him. Someone came to see him, and the secretary said, "Oh well, he's busy now. You'll need to wait." So he was waiting, and I guess like the secretary went out or something. So it was like an hour, like a lot of time passed. So the person who came to see him said, "Okay." So he opened the door and looked inside, and this big magistrate or a political leader, business person, whatever, was because he went to say, "What's he doing that he doesn't have time for me?" So he opened the door, and this big important person, he was on the ground playing horsey, and his grandson was driving him playing horsey. Okay, so that's the principle here, and clearly he was enjoying that a lot more than maybe this person who wanted to see him, praise him, to maybe get something, for yeah, like out of all reverence, I sort of I'll praise you, and some business relationship or some political favor, but the big important person was much more enjoying being in the subordinate role, just as Krishna enjoys being cared for by Vasudeva, Devaki, Mother Yashoda, Maharaj Nanda, like that. So I'm going to read this verse one more time. This is Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 2, Text 26. Tatananda Vrajamita Pitrakam Sadvibhyata Ekadasha Samastatra Gudharchi Sabalobasat. Thereafter his father, being afraid of Kamsa, brought him to the cow pastures of Maharaj Nanda, and there he lived for 11 years like a covered flame with his elder brother Baladev. Hare Krishna. I'll pause there. Thanks for being present and listening to Srimad Bhagavatam. Welcome if anyone would like to ask any questions, share any comments, share any realizations about anything in the verse or purport, anything I spoke, or anything related to the philosophy, history, and pastimes of Srimad Bhagavatam.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, dear Govinda.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, I'm appreciating being able to join class this morning before other family affairs start happening. And I was listening to the Caitanya Charita class last night, and there was a distinction made between the relationship, that Krishna had with devotees and Caitanya had with devotees. And so I can see where I was appreciating Krishna's ability to be seen as a friend or a brother, or like having a family relationship, because it's just natural love. So like my mother was receiving all sorts of phone calls from her siblings in the last couple of weeks of her life, and that was the most precious. And Junior, who couldn't come, he would always say, "I'm sending my unconditional love." And that's what I think of Krishna. I think of Krishna as always giving us unconditional love. And so anyway, that was something that was coming to mind. And then the other thing was, I really liked that we have Prabhupada, right? Because if I'm just reading the scriptures, I think it's a story. I think it's a beautiful story, but I think it's just a story. Because how could this naughty Krishna, when he's a baby, and this mischievous boy who steals the damsel's clothing from the riverbanks, how could this be God? and so I really appreciate having Prabhupada to be my spiritual teacher, so that I can see that it's there's no difference. There's still this relationship that's personal, and yet he's God, and there's just so much available to us. And so I just, yeah, appreciating, some nice memories, and appreciation for Prabhupada.
Thank you, Anasuya. Hare Krishna. Thanks for sharing. We so much feel your heart and your sharing. Yeah, about like if you're sharing about like tender, unconditional family relations with your uncles, mother's brother, and yeah, so we can see glimpses of that in this world. So why should the supreme? Why should that not exist in God? And that's why in hearing your sharing, honestly, I'm reminded of Prabhupada's pranam mantra. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarini. That Prabhupada came to the West, Paschatya Desha Tarini, which are filled with impersonalism and voidism, to deliver people like us with the message of Lord Caitanya, this very personal message. A couplet from a poem that Prabhupada wrote to his spiritual master, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta. Absolute is sentient, thou hast proved. Impersonal calamity, thou hast moved. Right? The idea is to deny that there's loving relation in the Supreme. It's like a calamity. It's tragic. It's very tragic. And so much of the philosophy, even in the name of religion, not all of it, like something like certainly a lot of Catholicism is very personal at its core, but so much of the other philosophies, the idea is that, so once this body dies, or once one attains enlightenment, then there's nothing, then there's no relation, or it's just merging into the one. But like it's like you're sharing with your mother, and there's sadness, there's pain, and there's a lot of joy there. There's a lot of a bittersweet joy there. There's a lot of joy there, because it's the nature of the soul. It's the nature of us to want to get richness through personal exchange, personal relationship. And when you share like your mother and her brother, you and your mother, and your mother and your father, I was very honored to be at the funeral ceremony. What you spoke touched my heart. The song sung by April, Ganashyam Prabhu, Chaplain Joseph, everything was just so beautiful, connected with the divine. So many relationships, right? And so why to think that relationships end once the body dies or the soul turns up? No, then we open up to timeless relationship that's never destroyed by anything like death. So I'm moved by appreciation of Srila Prabhupada, as you said. While I was backpacking around Europe in the summer of '83, I did read a version of Gita, not from Prabhupada. And it was like, even then, because even I was not like steeped in Prabhupada's teachings. Well, at least I didn't have the experience with Prabhupada's teachings that I have, almost 40 years later. And even then, I was just like, this is kind of dry, because like I could tell like they're trying to take Krishna out of Krishna's book, Bhagavad Gita. It's like trying to take Krishna. So I could read Bhagavatam. I might appreciate some of the stories and speculate about some of the with Prabhupada. We get that, just like that loving personal, the personal foundation of everything through Prabhupada, giving us the purports and translations. Thanks for sharing this.
Krishna.
Any other comments, questions, sharing, inspirations? Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama.
It's Gajendra.
Gajendra, yes.
Hare Krishna, good morning, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
I, hesitate a little bit. Just, following Mother Anasuya and the depth of feeling at this time, and but I something that's on my mind a lot recently, and earlier you were talking about open-mindedness, and I seem to have, in terms of my experience of my observance of what's happening in the world at this time, I'm feeling very affected by what I see as just a lot of quarrel and hypocrisy, a lot of distraction. I mean, it's so nice to actually just like hear about the pastimes of Radha and Krishna and Sri Chaitanya. It's just like, yeah, like that's just really coming back to it, sometimes even, because Krishna consciousness is all encompassing, but we can kind of, get out there in the realms of, like, okay, it's Varnashram, but we're just kind of like out there, socio-political, human, very, very, material world human stuff. And so I go through periods of life, and I've been in one where I myself get caught up in my own hypocrisy, my own lack of integrity, of judgment and criticism, and not being on the spiritual platform, not as much on the bodily platform. My attachments tend to be not so bodily, but oh boy, my thoughts, the particular shape that my intellect takes, I'm willing to offend and defend to no measure. This is where all my attachment is. I feel, threaten my body with the sword, threaten my belief system, disagree. Oh, this is very serious now. You seem to be understanding this. So a lot of it is a little bit removed. It's the squabbles of society. If I engage in the sort of receptive pajalpa of paying attention to what's the Democrats and Republicans are doing, liberals, conservatives, whatever. But it starts to get a little more concerning when I see what I think is an aspect of impersonalism. We're not strictly talking about Mayavad, but maybe in a Sattvato sense, how people communicate, and impersonalism, even amongst devotees. And I somehow on Facebook, I don't know, feces book, as I sometimes refer to it, something somewhere as I saw this progressive Vaishnavism, and I'm like, wow, it's just like all the stuff, and I'm not really wanting to take sides.
Yeah.
I have, my big flaw is my side is I'm very egalitarian when it comes to criticism. I really literally just I'm going to set myself at odds pretty much against every side and, you know, every person. I'm the ultimate in wanting to be above center. I really create the most obnoxious side there is, my own. But I do find it really sad when I find the Vaishnavas really in the name of sort of like, you know, love and preaching and broad-mindedness, open-mindedness, not really coming together, not really working together, even respectively, you know. I don't want to judge it. Maybe it's their devotion. It's like it's weird. I've even seen like pro-Hitler people. I've even seen like Hitler and Prabhupada. I'm just thinking, you know, I mean, I go like, oh, Srila Prabhupada's so merciful. He's got something for everybody, even if you're a Hitler-loving Nazi. I mean, Prabhupada's got mercy for you. Yeah. I mean, I find my own way of just appreciating and glorifying Prabhupada, you know, but another part of me is just like dumbfounded. And so I look at this and you know, so open-mindedness, I mean, in the sense that I think Prabhupada uses the word discrimination sometimes. It's about intelligence, like you have enough intelligence to look at this and look at that, and yeah, how, you know, how do we really become open-minded to Krishna? I mean, even not getting to the deep level of the heart yet, but how do we really become open-minded to Krishna, you know, what Krishna wants or Prabhupada wants and their desire, and how do we really put aside what are the pettiness of our points of view, or our little biases and conditionings from our experiences. You know, we want to respect the uniqueness and validate experiences, but how do we really come to really just truly being open-minded and loving, and not become subject to really what is just to me an infiltration of postmodern Kali Yuga in the realm of Vaishnavas. I don't know. I'm not trying to go too far from your class, but when you know, you talk about open-mindedness, it was just sort of like.
Well, I appreciate you sharing, and I hear you're feeling unsettled in some ways, distraught in some ways, in looking for, you know, what's the thread here, what's the balance. Your comments are so connected with an aspect of my class, the whole modernism, postmodernism. Like, yeah, postmodernism is characterized by an incredulity towards the possibility of foundations for knowledge. So the idea is that, like, oh yeah, there is no absolute, there is no real foundations for knowledge, not science, not the Pope, you know, like that. And so, and that's why we said, like, okay, this open-mindedness, but it's meant to be an instrumental virtue, that we use the tool of open-mindedness to come to that which is objectively true, objectively good, objectively beautiful, and not right. And so, okay, so as far as like love and empathy and compassion, it's a very Vaishnava thing to do, to cultivate love, empathy, compassion for everyone, for everyone. Yeah, you know, whatever their points of view. So let's take, I mentioned Prahlad Maharaj during the class, so he's like our quintessential example of compassion. And, you know, like he said, but paradukkha dukkhi, right? Like he doesn't want to be liberated from material miseries till everyone else is liberated. He has such compassion, feeling others' pain as his own. I heard one lecture in Prabhupada said, yes, that is a Vaishnava, paradukkha dukkhi, feeling someone else's pain as one's own. And Prabhupada said, material consciousness is parasukha dukkhi. When someone else is suffering and miserable, then we are happy. And if they're doing well, then we are sad. And Prabhupada said, that's material consciousness. And Prabhupada said, of course we don't say that. But Prabhupada is very, essential truth spoken concisely is true eloquence. So there's such like astute psychology in Prabhupada saying, of course we don't say that. Oh, I feel so bad for you. But really we're happy that they're suffering. That's material consciousness. And just like so concise, essential truth spoken concisely is true eloquence. So yeah, so we want to cultivate compassion, empathy for everyone, including those who identify as Nazis or whatever. Okay. All right. And then Prahlad Maharaj, so he had that compassion, empathy for everyone. And he also had knowledge. He also had knowledge to actually help people to relieve themselves from the suffering, from the misery. So that's why like along with empathy, compassion, we want to cultivate conceptual and realized knowledge as ready to empathically, compassionately, in a connected way to share that Divya Gyan on behalf of Srila Prabhupada. So like that's real compassion. We have the knowledge to do something about it. We have the knowledge to help someone relieve themselves of the torment. And whether we do or whether, as Bhaktisiddhanta said, the world stands in no need of any reforming, right?
Yeah.
Right. So the world, if someone is acting ignorantly and like envious of their own self and just letting the diamond get covered more and more, and like that, okay, this is Om Purnam Hara Purnamidam Purnamudachyate. It's perfect, complete. At the same time, we don't want to like artificially pretend we're Uttama Adhikaris. We want to like, I want to endeavor to be like praying deeply. What's my service? And sometimes my service is to see things, not to wear blinders, to make distinctions, and to tolerate in silence. It's not my service to speak up. And sometimes it's my service to speak up and to share. And in that process, I get enlightened in more distinctions. I get to see my own impurities. So it's like to be clear, like what's our service? And service means like, it's not that the world needs reforming. The only thing needed is a shift in consciousness, And so what's my role in being a stand for the shift, and for that shift in consciousness, for that purification of heart, starting with my own heart. So the idea of making distinctions according to higher principles, according to Shastra, making distinctions, that's not contradictory to cultivating love, empathy, and compassion.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate your sharing. Thank you. Any other questions, comments, sharing at this time?
Hare Krishna.
Hiya.
Thank you, David. I didn't get to stay, or I didn't get to attend the whole class. I joined at the last, I don't know, I would say 10 minutes. But I'm grateful to have gotten to hear everyone sharing. it was a gift to get to hear everyone's reflections, especially Anasuya, and also, Gajendra. There was something that Gajendra said that I was able to reflect on in my morning practice this morning of chanting. So this past week, feeling like I was more connected to material energy than to Krishna's energy. And there was something that Gajendra asked, the question of, okay, well, how do we align more with what Krishna wants versus what we want, or not what Krishna wants and what Prabhupada wants. And I was reflecting on that this morning as I was chanting, and it was my attachment. It was, I want things to be my way. And I had been in that, like, kind of that consciousness or mentality for the past 3 days. And it was chanting that brought me back this morning. So I wanted to share that because it was, I was very grateful to recognize in my chanting that if I can realign with Krishna, then I'm less attached to what my ego wants. And it's a practice for me, and it's a challenge, and I feel like I keep going back and forth. And I just wanted to share my gratitude, and to just even have this space to come on and hear you giving class. So thank you.
Thank you, Paya. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I'm moved to hear your realizations and reconnection during japa. And yeah, in one sense, there are so many nuances and subtleties and shades of gray. In another sense, it's kind of like, to the extent that we're filling up the cup of our consciousness with Krishna through chanting, through eating, through honoring prasadam, through association like this, then there's not place for the forgetfulness, and there's not place for the alienation. And to the extent that we're filling up the cup of our consciousness with those activities, those thoughts that alienate the self from the self, then Krishna, then Krishna is forgotten.
Thank you for reflecting that, because I'm laughing because the past 3 days I was filling myself up with some YouTube videos. So of course I was disconnected, and I wasn't chanting as much as I had been, as been so committed to my chanting. And just the past 3 days, I allowed one little, like, I would say anartha in me to let me continue down that path, rather than to fill myself up with an association of Krishna and with devotees and you all. And so thank you for reflecting that, because I think I almost would have skirted past that this was due to my feeding the anartha rather than choosing to connect with Krishna.
Thanks for sharing, Paya. Yeah, we could have this one anartha, one unwanted habit, and we just follow that, and that can lead us into a pit. And, yeah. Krishna says even one of the senses can lead us way astray.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. And so sometimes I say that whether I'm following the process given by Prabhupada, the process of Bhakti Yoga, or whether I'm not following it, I always get confirmation of the truth of the process. Because if I'm not following, like I spend a few hours on YouTube videos that aren't really my devotional service. Okay, I have an experience which confirms just what Bhagavad Gita says. And when I'm following it, like right now discussing, I have an experience in my consciousness that also confirms, here's what you'll experience if you're immersed in the process. Thanks for sharing, Paya.
I don't know, just musing a little bit. I don't know if you appreciate it or not, but just there's sort of like, like pulling the weeds in the heart, and there's also this statement sort of like can't see the forest through the trees. I'm sort of realizing that in my heart, I'm like kind of looking for, no, it's just one solid weed. That's all there is. And I'm looking around. I don't see any weeds. I don't see any weed. It's just one massive one weed. It's just large and thick, and I don't see any weeds. But yeah.
I appreciate that imagery and relate to it. Hare Krishna. Thank you all for your devotional association. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare
Jai.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.